Hello everyone. Thanks for joining me for tonight's episode. Tonight I'll be narrating a story from one of my subscribers. And again, as always, I remind you all to please be mindful and respectful in the comments field below. Sharing your personal stories is not always the easiest thing to do, so please take into consideration the time that these individuals spent writing out these stories and sharing them with us. And to the ones who submitted the stories over to me, I just wanted to give you another thank you for the content that you've provided. And of course, you guys will remain anonymous, and slight details and the names of the individuals within these stories have been altered to protect everyone's identity. So please sit back, put on a good pair of headphones or speakers, and let's begin. So to give you a brief intro of the setting of my story, I've been working for this company in which I won't name for privacy reasons, but I've been here since 2011. I started working here after I graduated high school. Never once have I witnessed anything paranormal here, but the reason I even mention this is because a lot of my coworkers who have been here for a number of years have had countless creepy stories about things that have been happening in the workplace. And not that it matters, but the majority of the minorities that worked here all happen to be Hmong. And we all know that when scary stories are told in your native tongue, it just makes things all the more creepy. But to get to my story, so we have this machine that was set further away from the rest of the production machines that ran behind the warehouse located towards the north side of the building. It was particularly operated by the same person every single night. Since it was more located towards the back, the only thing you could hear was the noise coming from the machine itself. I had this coworker. Let's just name him Jur. He was in his mid-40s or so. Not entirely your best employee. He would often complain to the shift manager, saying how he couldn't work over there by himself because it just felt too isolated, or that it gave him the creeps. But since the manager saw this as more of a personal issue and not so much of a production issue, his complaints would be ignored, and he would continue to be stationed there moving forward. Again, Jur wasn't a very good employee, but he had somehow earned his veteran status for being a long-time employee at this company. On more than one occasion, I heard him yelling at the managers, complaining about how they were working him too hard, and then he would bitch about getting raises but would never show up to work on time. Us young bucks here just refer to him as the OG, or in Hmong, Lai Lao, because he didn't really give a fuck about anyone or anything. During break one time, he had told us all in Hmong that when he had operated the machine, about 10 minutes in, he started to feel like there were eyes on him. And then he started to hear humming from a distance. But it couldn't have possibly been the machine, since the machine made more of a clicking sound, kind of like the sound of tapping on a desk. The humming, however, had a tune to it as well. From his description, it sounded more like Hmong singing. Hmong singing such as Gutsia, in which, to give you a brief description, these were songs that we sang in our native tongue when we were bored or lonely, or when we simply wanted to impress someone that we liked, in hopes of getting a response back from that person with a song of their own. But to get back to the story, everyone in the break room were skeptical, and no one believed him, and everyone just started making jokes about it. Jokes like, you need to stop smoking that good stuff before coming into work, or maybe it's a dead ex-girlfriend from Thailand. This, of course, would result in Jer walking off in a tantrum. But whatever the case was, Jer swore by the words he told us. Every time he would hear the humming sound, he would make his way to the closest restroom and just hide in there, and to collect his thoughts. But even when he was hiding in the restroom, the humming was still very present. Since I was a material handler at that time, I would often see him at that machine. My work procedure was to simply walk around, handing off materials to the operator who worked the machine that shift. He would always try to get me to stay with him, engaging in long OG lectures or conversations about gambling in Thailand and how it all worked. One time though, Jer was so terrified that he had to leave and go home one night. And this night happened to be Halloween. What a coincidence, right? No one really knew what made him leave that night. He just told everyone that he was zoning out while working, and then he felt a heavy presence behind him, which then made him feel very weak, timid, and very nauseous. What makes this very unsettling is that while he was zoned out, he claimed that he saw a lady at the corner of his eye. Not long after, he fell into a trance-like state. He then started moving his hand closer to the sharp part of this machine that he was operating, which resulted in him cutting himself up pretty bad. The sharp pain snapped him back into reality. He then looked around frantically, but saw no one. This lady was nowhere to be seen. All that was visible was a pool of his own blood in his workspace. However, what terrified him the most was that after he had rushed into the restroom to tend his wound, both the supervisor and him had heard toilet seats slamming against the bowl, but no one else was in the restroom besides them two. A few weeks later, the company had went through the security footage soon after Jer returned to work from the injury he sustained. The human resources team and Jer both looked at the footage. What he told them was that the incident took place at approximately 8:45 p.m. And so they forwarded the tape to that exact timestamp, and what they saw next gave Jer the chills. But not for any of the reasons you would think, no. See, what had freaked Jer out was that when he was zoned out with his hand headed towards the sharp part of the machine, a moth had appeared out of nowhere, blocking the view of the camera, in which startled HR as well. But you see, the creepy part in all this, and the part that still makes Jer scared to this day, is that back in Thailand, Jer had an ex-girlfriend who had passed away. Her name was Gambo, which translates to moth in Hmong. This is one of the many superstitions that we have within our culture. That when one passes, they can come back as a different life form to revisit loved ones, people they used to know, for good reasons. But of course, there are also times when they come back to revisit you for more dark and sinister reasons. And then, To add on to this, some of the older coworkers came up with the assumption that maybe Jur didn't tell us the full story. Because you see, in our culture, we have this thing known as the blood promise, or blood oath. In Hmong, we call this Honchate. This is the ultimate promise between two individuals who have vowed to love each other and go on to make a promise that, in the worst case scenario, if one were to die due to illness or suicide over the fact that their parents would not let them be together, or for any other related circumstances that resulted in death, that person who died would come back for the one still living, take them by the hand, and resume living in the afterlife together for all of eternity. But as young lovers, this would sound as the most romantic thing you could do for each other. Especially when you're in a situation where both your parents would not let you and your lover be together, and there was just no other way. However, this is a forbidden process, and all of the elders would tell you no different. To make this promise, one of the lovers would either prick or cut one of their fingers to expose their own blood. They would then do the same to their lover, or advise for them to do the same. After this, they would go on to exchange each other's drops of blood onto a leaf. This is where they would both then drink the blood of one another as the ultimate promise that would confirm that they would never be separated. But of course, no one really knows if Jur really did this with his past lover or not. All we know is that when we mentioned his ex-lover, he would just change the subject or make up an excuse and exit the conversation. Not too long after Jur's incident at work, he decided to resign from his position, and well, no one really knows what happened or what became of him. Some of the older coworkers said that he ended up going crazy and that he lost his mind after what had happened. And then some say that he just kind of vanished and no one has seen or heard from him since. Though these are all just speculations, I can't help but to really think that something more sinister and paranormal had a real play in all of this. Whatever the case, and though there are many beautiful aspects of our Hmong culture, these are just a few of the things about it that can keep you up at night.